So let's talk about the personality types within a group. So I think an important thing to do when you're interacting with a group, whether it's before they enter your studio and just your phone calls and your emails back and forth, is kind of identify the different roles of people within the group and the strengths and weaknesses of the players. Because, you know, again, these people are tools that you use to make a record, and you're a tool for them too. You're a tool. Yeah, you know. So anyway, the first type of personality type would be sort of the musical director and the business director. So those are like your point people, and you want to try to identify those pretty early on. You know, the musical director might be the primary songwriter or the person who has, you know, who really has a vision of what the record's going to be and where it's going to go. And that person might be the primary songwriter. They might be the best musician in the band. They might be the worst musician in the band. And I think it's easy to say like, hey, that guy's a way better guitar player than that guy. But the worst guitar player might actually be the songwriter. He might be the one who has the vision, and that great guitar player is sort of his tool to get his vision across. I've recorded quite a few bands like that. So, you know, don't sweep any band member under the rug. You know, you might have this like hidden musical director and the worst musician in the group. Then there's the business director, and that's your point person for, you know, all things scheduling and billing and, you know, booking a mastering engineer and, you know, where are we going to order drum heads from and so forth and so on. You know, so the business director is the primary person to keep in the loop in regard to any business related stuff. So the next personality type should be the easiest one to work with, and that's the team player and or the hired gun. And that's a person who is playing in an ensemble. They're good at their instrument, they understand their role within their ensemble, and they're not a glory hound. They're not trying to step outside of their role. They know like, hey, you know what? I just play bass. I know that what I do is hold down the bottom end. I'm not trying to do any like lead bass or anything like that. Or, you know, the drummer knows like, hey, I can play this, just whatever you want. Tell me, do I do a D beat here or do I do double bass or whatever? Just tell me what to do. And I know that it's your vision, and I'm going to do what it takes to support what the musical director tells me to do. The third one is the non-musician handed a bass or a mic, second guitarist. You find a lot of the bands I have end up having like their buddy in the band, who is like, you know, he's probably like the fun guy that they enjoy hanging out with, who keeps the mood light, and he's probably crucial for that. He might even be the zany guy. But maybe he or she are not the greatest musician in the band, but don't discount their role. And maybe even though they might not be the greatest musician in the band, their role as zany guy or whatever to keeping the mood light, or maybe that person is the business director also, or maybe that person is the musical director. So try to be patient with recording those people. And personally, I don't have the lack of heart to take their instrument away and assign their parts to somebody else. There's a lot of engineers who will say like, dude, you're not playing on the record. I'm not that guy. If that decision is made, I want it to be made within the band and not for me, because I feel as though a lot of times, well, with anything in music, the greater your involvement in it, the greater ownership you take over that music. So, and if you remove someone's involvement from playing on their own band's record, then they're going to lose their motivation to stay with the band. And I find that in a lot of cases, like, you've experienced this? Yeah. So in a lot of cases, you know, if a person sort of gets bumped off of a record, they're likely to leave. They get offended, you know, it hurts their pride, and they're likely to leave the band. You know, they feel a little bit betrayed by their bandmates. But, you know, in some cases, that person might be a great team player and might know, like, hey, what's best for the record is for me not to play on it. And that sort of brings me to the role of the second guitarist. You know, there's some bands where that are two guitar bands that have each guitarist has their own distinct personality and are each crucial to the band. In the case of Nice Hooves, who's the video that you saw earlier, and the song that we're going to be taking audio examples from, the two guitar players in that band, Randall and Aaron, are very different from each other, but both equally important. Randall's a little more wild; he's got a little more character in his playing, but Aaron is like super tight and rock solid, and their parts are hard panned, and they're not always playing the same thing as each other. So in that case, there's like or like the Fugazi thing or something like that. Like there's two guitar players doing really distinct things, and their interaction is what makes the band. But also, like in the case of other bands, and a lot of metal type bands will have a second guitarist really just there to beef up the live sound, and the parts that one guitar player and the other guitar player are doing are not really very different from each other. And in that case, depending on whether or not you want sort of like a loose, big, open sounding record, or whether you want like a really tight record, you might want to have one guitar player do all of the rhythm guitars. And if that's the case, you don't have to approach the second guitarist or the band saying like, hey, that guy shouldn't be on the record, but you might want to say like, hey, we really want to have like super tight rhythm guitars, and we don't really want to hear the nuances varying between the left and right speaker. We want to have it kind of locked in, so maybe like, this guy should do all the rhythm guitar playing. Or maybe it's even like, this person should do all the rhythm guitar playing for these songs, and then the other person should do all the rhythm guitar playing for those songs. Different ways to handle the less proficient musician role within a band. Then the next bullet is basically about singers. It can be about anybody, but singers need to be sometimes need to be coddled a little bit more than other band members, and I think it's people talk about lead singer disease, and I'd be curious to actually do a scientific study someday as if like certain personality types are attracted to certain instruments, or if certain instruments further certain personality traits within a person. But lead singers they have a lot of focus on them. Like the casual listener of music really focuses on the singer more than any other member of a band, and so they have a lot of focus on them, which is a lot of pressure. And you need to understand that as you're recording them, you need to sort of, as you're recording the singer, they need a little bit more focus and a little bit more attention on than the other players. Like you can press record on a guitar track and then like check your phone a little bit while the guitar player is rolling through a song. A singer, you have to be 100% focused on all the time, and that might mean clearing everybody else out of the room. And so that they can really focus on their craft and to make sure that they understand that you are with them 100% of the way, because they are not. They also the voice is such a personal thing. Like when you're. It's easy to say like, yeah, I'm a terrible guitar player, but it's your hands. It's your body, but it's your hands, and it's more of an interpretive type of instrument, whereas the voice is very personal, because it's not just it's your body, but it's also your thoughts. It's your intellectual content. So to have that fall under criticism is a bit harder for a singer to handle than another instrumentalist within the group. So bear that in mind as you're interacting with the singer, that they need that a little bit of extra attention, and that maybe berating them is not the best thing to do. And then, finally, I talked a little bit about before, the zany guy and the scapegoat. Sometimes there's just, one member whose contribution to the group is levity, comic relief, a whipping boy, or whatever it may be. And even if they're not a great player, don't discount their importance to the group, and use it and make fun of them and fart on them and stuff like that. All right.
One really quick question
Sure.
From Justin Gagne about different archetypes, I guess you could call them. What about the blooming audio engineer who has conflicting or less experienced ideas about what you should be doing?
Oh yeah, actually, that's a great one. Because I was that guy, and I hate myself for it. Although I think you tend to, just as a person, you tend to be irritated with people who have some of the same personality traits that you have. So yeah, sometimes that can be irritating. I've certainly recorded quite a few people who have an interest in recording, and I think early on I was more annoyed with them than I have been recently, because early on I felt like, oh, this person's questioning what I'm doing, and they don't have confidence in me, and or they're sidetracking me. But as I became sort of a little more confident in what I do and a little bit more experienced, I've come to like working with other audio engineers. It helps keep me honest, and I think that it's also great working with someone who's articulate about their ideas. The one thing that can be a little bit challenging is, as you're first getting into something, you have just enough knowledge to be dangerous, but you don't necessarily have the experience to know how to apply all that knowledge. So sometimes I'll record people be like, why are you using a SM57 there? Or why aren't you using a SM58 or whatever? And that's a perfectly valid question, but when there's too much of that, it can derail the session a little bit. And one of my ongoing themes in this class is really going to be that there's no right or wrong answers to anything, and that these things are all just tools, and I can get a great tom sound with a 421 or an E22 or a 57 or whatever. They're all valid tools, and but it's again, it's like nice to work with people that have some experience in that, and if the tone that they're hearing coming out of the speakers isn't really working for them, and they can say like, hey, let's try a small diaphragm condenser on that instead of a large diaphragm, that can sometimes be a good idea. And also, speaking of that, I think I hadn't really planned to talk about this all that much, but sometimes I find that a client will come up with an idea, whether it's an engineering choice or a stylistic choice, like, hey, let's try this lo-fi drum intro, or let's try a small diaphragm mic on this, or let's try such and such a lead overdub, and your brain might instantly go, stupid idea. Don't say stupid idea right away. Take some time to think about it and try to see their viewpoint. But also, even if you know 100% for sure that it's a stupid idea, sometimes it takes less time to just try it and illustrate to them and the rest of the group that maybe it's just not a good idea. Sometimes it takes less time to try that than it does to justify it without an audio example. And sometimes it helps build your client's confidence in you that you're willing to listen to their input and then try out their ideas, see how it all works, and show them that it's not a great idea. And then, you know what? Sometimes you're surprised. Maybe it actually is a great idea, and you thought it was going to be stupid, but then it rules. So I would urge you to always, time permitting, listen to what they have to say and try it out. Or, if you really don't think there's time, build consensus. Take your idea and say, hey, what do you got? I'm not sure. What do you guys think? And put it to the rest of the group rather than having to be the bad guy all the time. You need to rest your ears. You need to have fresh air and stuff like that. You need to have a pleasant work environment. And if you are irritated, then you're not going to be doing good work. And also think about this as you're setting up your studio or your space, whatever space you're going to be recording in. You don't want to be making engineering decisions based on convenience. I made I made myself a nice patch bay when I set up my studio. My current mixing console is sort of like a wraparound deal, so all my key outboard gear is sort of within arm's reach. So, in my previous setup, I might say, it'd be nice to use such and such a compressor on this, but then I got to do all this weird patching and crawl around behind the rack and do that, and then roll over here to do that. And I'm like, it's going to take a long time, so I'll just use this other thing that's right in front of me. So, just recognize that all of us are inherently lazy. So the more work you can do up front to set yourself up to not make your laziness affect your creative decisions, the better work you'll do. second thing about keeping yourself happy is, I know that not everyone is afforded the situation where they can pick and choose their clients the way that I can. But I really try to work on. There's got to be some sort of redeeming quality to each project that I take on, whether I really like the people or I really like their music or like, even something like, oh, they've got this, it's a style that I've never done before, or they've got this like awesome guitar amp that I want to try recording out of, or, find something great about each project you take on that you can focus on. And, maybe it's a terrible band, maybe it's terrible people, and think about that as, an opportunity to practice, new techniques or how to coax something out of people you don't particularly care for, or try to open your mind to a new musical genre, or what have you. For me, as I mentioned earlier, like I try to pick projects that are people that I enjoy interacting with and music that I enjoy listening to, because I'm going to have to listen to this stuff for 10 hours a day. So I want to make sure it's something that I enjoy, because I know that if I don't enjoy it, I'm not going to work as hard on it. It's going to be more like a job, and I'm going to be watching the clock. Like, I can't wait to get this over with. And that is, like even groups that I don't care for and people that I maybe don't care for, I still want them to have a great, positive recording experience. And so I try, if I know that I can't provide that to them, I'll bow out of the project and suggest that maybe they record with someone better suited to their style. And so yeah, I guess that's all about keeping yourself happy. And just one last thing about keeping yourself happy is kind of got to let the clients, and this also goes back to transparency is and malleability, is let the clients know when you aren't happy. You don't have to like let it affect them too much, but like, don't be afraid to say like, guys, look, we stopped being creative 3 hours ago, and now we're just like beating our heads against the wall, and like, I'm not feeling good about myself right now. I'm not feeling creative, so let's just break for the day and come back tomorrow fresh. The point of the slide really is about don't be afraid to admit that you've made a mistake or that you're in over your head. Remember that your clients, they've slaved away writing these songs and rehearsing these songs for a long time. It's really important to them that that the final product of this record meets or exceeds their expectations. And if you feel as though you're not up to task, make sure they understand that. Make sure they know that you're not deflecting responsibility for anything. Like if you guys rent a studio to record in, or whatever, or you have like a crappy sounding room in your basement that you're working out of, or your mix isn't up to snuff and the band is unhappy after mastering. Don't deflect that. Like if the band doesn't like the master, maybe they don't like the mix, and volunteer that, hey, maybe I could do better. And I mean, there's definitely times where like on more than one occasion where a band has recorded with me, we've mixed the record and they think it's good, and then they master the record and then realize like, hey, maybe this isn't so great, and then I'm always like kind of in the loop on a band's discussions with mastering engineers, and sometimes they'll be, I can tell that they're kind of upset with the mastering engineer because they're not pleased with the results of their master. And if that's the case, chime in and say, hey, you know what? Maybe it's not the mastering engineer's fault, and don't blame that person. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I need to remix this thing. And depending on how emotionally invested you are in the record, and maybe you offer to remix it for free. I've certainly done that before. If I'm really emotionally invested in a record and I feel like I just screwed the pooch, then and I want to make sure that it's right, then sometimes I do some pro bono work. But in the end of the day, you're like, all you can really do is the best you can with the tools that you have in front of you. And so as long as you try 110%, then you'll be good. And I think that your clients will appreciate that in you when they see you sort of taking up the reins and treating their baby with the respect that it deserves. And by the end of a project, I always tend to feel like I'm a fifth or sixth member of their group. I think that's what they want to feel. They want to feel like a true partner in their project.